Did you bring the minutes last meeting?
No, we will table them until, oh,
That's
I'm
fine.
sorry.
If
Nope.
you don't have them, it's fine. Okay, we'll just do
The
it next
minutes
time.
of the July and the August meetings I do have for signature. I do not have the September meeting
Okay.
minutes. They'll be ready at the next meeting.
I can't remember what we do something.
I think we already accepted those, if I'm not mistaken, had we not?
Yes.
Okay.
Right, we
All
just
we
gotta
gotta do
do
is sign.
September's
Yep,
when they
that's
do
fine.
come out, yep.
No problem. You ready?
Yes.
All right. We'll start this plan for me. Please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. One nation under God, indivisible. That's for all. So the first thing we ought to do is might as well sign the minutes, get that done. We'll talk about this little piece of new business, which I don't think is going to be terribly.
Seems like, I didn't like the last one. Then he was up to his camp most of the week and he said if it was unloaded, he'd come down.
Guys in the practice of always signing them.
We always used to, and then COVID, I guess. I don't know. It never started up again after that. So yes, we always used to have to sign them.
Okay, I found a binder full of them and I was like, I guess I should be doing this. So I figured I would bring them.
No problem. Pam,
Yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir.
I'll make sure I was here.
Another meeting.
Yeah.
Oh.
There you go. You can now.
Was this, that one meeting I took right over?
You did. You can take over a lot more if you want.
Satisfied and very happy
Okay.
with all the hard work I've done.
Well, at least you showed up.
Good point. Danny out of here overheard me. Danny was at his camp most of last week and he thought he did some statements and
That's when he was absent, so you don't need to,
I
right?
told him, I thought we could deal with it.
Well, I actually ended up calling him back. He called me. I was walking my dog, left my phone in the truck.
Oh,
I called him back when I got back.
so,
He shooting the birds up there this week?
you know, I forgot to ask him that
Oh my
question.
God. How am I gonna spy on him if you don't keep an eye on him for me?
I know.
I only saw one bird.
You can steer him back in, Isabel. It's all right. You have the authority.
All right.
I only saw one bird this weekend, caught a lot of bass, so. Anyway, so we got that little piece of business done. Now, our new business is a determination of comprehensive plan compliance
Mhm.
for the Economic Development Program Grant. And the applicant is the Damascotta Good Coffee LLC, which is Capacity.
So
Go ahead. You want to
just a little
fill 'em
bit, yeah, just a little bit of background. The town was recently allocated funds through the Community Development Block Grant process, which will fund various equipment purchases, working capital, and inventory for Capacity. More specifically, Capacity has indicated that they will utilize the funds to buy new restaurant equipment, upgrade the existing electrical components, and add new shelving units and cold storage in the basement. They will also be potentially redoing the roof of the property where their building is.
They're gonna do that building, and they're gonna do that shed out back.
I believe the main building.
Main
Yeah.
building? Okay.
As an aside, Max is here from Midcoast Council of Governments. He's helping Capacity through the grant process. And is here to answer any background questions. What I did in my memo was just sort of summarize the comprehensive plan and what it says about this area of town. I did want to note that there are a variety of policies outlined in the comprehensive plan regarding creating downtown and Village Main Street as a key shopping location and general economic development goals for that area. There's nothing that specifically says that community development block grant should be spent on these kinds of things. There's also nothing that doesn't say that, or there's nothing that also doesn't say that. So generally the goals are surrounding economic development in that area of town. Basically, the planning board's role in this case is just to make a finding regarding the project's consistency with the comprehensive plan. I've provided a recommended motion based on my findings for you to consider. And if you agree with me, that's on the last page of my memo. I think that's all I have.
Okay.
Was the color of the shingles or this new roofing? Do they know or?
I'm not sure if they know yet, but that will be required to go through the new historic preservation ordinance that was adopted, I believe, in 2019.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I assumed, and that's why I
Yeah,
didn't see it, and.
Yeah.
There certainly is an element in town that's very sensitive to color.
Not to
So-
mention what it is. Metal roof down there, kill somebody.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
well, yeah, if snow comes off.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
So anyway. So how do we make any kind of decision without knowing that?
So yeah, this is sort of a weird,
I've never been through anything like this.
Sort
So
of
you go
unique.
ahead.
This
Yeah,
is our
so-
first, go at it.
so as the planning board, you're kind of given statutory authority over interpreting the comprehensive plan and interpreting consistency with the comprehensive plan. So in general, what you are sort of blessing with my recommended motion is the allocation of the grant funds itself. Maybe you can jump in if I'm incorrect, but that's sort of what we're looking for. The select board will also be holding a public hearing on the allocation of the funds at their meeting later this month on the 19th, I believe. And then the applicants are also aware that, you know, any construction will need to go through the proper permitting authorities, whether that's the planning board, the historic preservation review committee, or just the code officer. So this is not necessarily opining on construction, it's opining on the general project as outlined in the CDBG application. That makes
Over the past few years, there have been a number of re-roofings along Main Street.
Mhm.
And to my knowledge, none of them ever came to the planning board. But the historical ordinance has only been in place, like you said. So, and I'm not sure, well, I think Jonathan said we've never dealt with. And I'm always curious. Like, who decides first? Is it the historical people or the planning board? And I know the focus of the historical committee is to ensure there's no dramatic change or whatever the things that they have outlined, is followed.
Yeah. The design of the roof and the proposed design changes aren't necessarily what we're even opining on this evening. But just for your knowledge, the Historic Preservation Review Committee would typically review proposals first, and then only if it actually is required to go to the planning board because it falls under site plan or subdivision criteria, would it come to you all. So there could be a variety of items that go on downtown that would never come to the planning board because they don't meet site plan review criteria. And they would only go to the Historic Preservation Review Committee because they're sort of reviewing, I call it like design review versus what you all have is like site review. And sometimes design review of certain things. But
So with the exception of the roofing, the only projects that we're dealing with tonight are internal shelving, upgrades inside.
Yeah.
And then it sounds like even the roofing is gonna have to come back to us.
the roofing will likely only go to the Historic Preservation Review Committee.
Okay.
Yeah.
So will that automatically happen?
They would need to submit an application. The application process for the Historic Preservation Review Committee is quite similar. They're basically submitting a packet of information, but specific to the materials and the architecture of the proposed renovations or what have you.
Right, because I just don't want to have us say, yes, we approve tonight, and then that skip through the loophole, if you will.
Right. I tried to word my recommended motion in such a way that, while you all are finding that the proposed use of the funding is consistent with the community's goals within the comprehensive plan, I actually specifically say noting that capacity is aware that permitting of any construction will need to follow the relevant review procedures.
Yep, perfect.
So is it significant that they applied for a grant? Or did they apply for it, or did somebody? I don't even know the process, but
That might be a better question for you to answer if you don't mind.
Well, I was going to ask a similar question. You know, I started kind of diving into CDBG grants, trying to understand, you know, what they are. I didn't realize that like a private business, like I know about nonprofits applying, towns applying. I didn't know a private business could apply for one of these types of grants. And does that like affect our ability as a community to apply for such a grant to like fix our sidewalks? I mean,
Water mains, things like that.
yeah, or water mains or things like that. I mean, do we only get allocated a certain amount of money? And you know, how does this work?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask Max to
One
jump
that I
in.
was gonna ask when everybody
Right.
was done, literally, why is a private entity that owns that building? It is not a public building, it's a private building.
Mhm.
So why would where does this money come from? Does it come from the state?
So community development block grants, a very fun little umbrella category for different grants. So there is the private business one that you're talking about. That's the only one that would go to a private business. There are about 5 or 6 other categories. There's downtown revitalization, there's housing assistance, which Waldeboro is actually doing right now. There's the public infrastructure, which I think
We've used.
you're using right now this year, actually, and I'll get to that in just a moment. There's also the public service one, which I think Damerscott actually did a while ago with the YMCA for the childcare services.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of topics when we're saying CDBG. This is just economic development program, which is just a business saying to the town of Damerscott, can you apply on our behalf so that we will create these jobs? That's one of the requirements for this. They get $30,000 for each new full-time position that will be created from this investment. So for the amount they're asking for, they are saying by the end of it, there is going to be 4 full-time positions at our business. And they have to provide a match of half of what they're requesting. So the town's not really giving any money right now. I think the only thing you're spending time on is the notices that Isabel and the town and Andy had to put together for the public hearing in the next 2 weeks, and any work that you're doing right now. But everything else is coming from the business pretty much.
And it does not affect the town in future grants that they would apply for infrastructure. or-
Oh, and that was one of the things I had to make sure about when we were doing the letter of intent back in March, where if capacity applied, it doesn't impact what you're doing right now on, did you say it was like Church Street or, yeah, the sidewalk project going on
Right.
right now? That what you're doing now, what capacity is doing wouldn't impact that project. And they said it's 2 different categories. And so they're treated very separately.
so let's it isn't clear yet. I feel like I'm looking through a mud puddle.
Right.
Trying to see the bottom, but so the selectmen apply for this grant.
Yes, technically.
Well, that's important because I fully understand the concept of the town, meaning the selectmen.
Right.
Doing things, this, you know, gone on for
Mhm.
ever since I can remember. So what I hear is that capacity is requesting the selectmen or the town to apply for the grant.
That was done back in June, yes. But-
But I'm a little confused as to what the role of the planning board is.
So
Especially after what you've already done it.
Yeah, so your role is only to serve as sort of the interpreters of the comprehensive plan. So when the comprehensive plans are adopted, the planning board makes a finding, basically to send it on to the state. And you sort of adopt that yourselves. I assume that occurred.
Sounds close enough to me.
So basically, and you're given the authority to, not necessarily, I don't want to go as far as to say interpret, because that has a different connotation, but your role is often to find that projects are consistent with the comprehensive plan, that ordinance amendments or zoning amendments are consistent with the comprehensive plan. You're sort of charged with being the keepers, I would say, of the comprehensive plan. And so you're asked to basically opine that the proposed use of the funds is consistent with the goals and policies outlined in the comprehensive plan.
And I'll add right now that back in June, the select board already went through the motion to allow capacity to support submitting the application on Capacity's behalf. The application was already allocated and approved by the state of Maine right now.
Mhm.
So right now, the state of Maine has just said everything that Capacity says they are going to do is acceptable. We don't see any issues or conflicts with this using our funds. So we're in what's called phase 2, where the town has to now say if what Capacity wants to do is conflicting with anything in the local rules and regulations. So that's why we're coming to the planning board in case there is a planning board requirement right now that you can think of, although we've already discussed the condition that it's going to go to the historic committee, and they say it has to come to the planning board, then it'll come to the planning board. The code enforcement officer has to do an environmental review to ensure that we're not building in a wetland or coastal zone, which it's not because there's no construction outside of the roof repair. And I had to send something off to the State Historic Preservation Office to be sure that this project's not impacting any of their rules or regulations.
I think maybe that this is a broader conversation that I'm recognizing we need to have about the planning board's role surrounding the adopted comprehensive plan. But yeah, as an aside to this, basically I've kind of reviewed it against the policies and goals. As I mentioned, there are no specific policies or goals stating that this wouldn't be necessarily appropriate in light of the adopted 2014 comprehensive plan. So that's sort of where we are now.
I think some of that might disappeared, but I'm not sure.
Information.
Definitely need her verbiage.
Yeah.
I'm truly interested in how replacing the roof helps, employ 4 more people. I don't get the connection, tell you the truth.
So the roof is actually just going to be part of their match. Their main, what they're using the CDBG money for is primarily going to be improving the equipment, the electricity, the inside of the building itself, so they can actually do a lot more of the activities they've started doing this past year, which has been getting a lot more customers. More customers means they're going to be busier, and busier means they're going to need more staff. And that's the logic they had when applying and what they said to the state was going to be done.
Yeah, I don't have
It's
any
just a
problem
match.
with, upgrading electrical, putting in equipment and hiring more people. That's all consistent. The one that I was confused with is replacing a roof and how that relates to.
Well, and I don't disagree, Alda, but I don't think it's our responsibility to figure out if the grant monies that they're applying for are going to the projects that are gonna create the jobs. I think that's up to the CBDG Foundation and them to work out that if they don't fall within the details of the grant, then I'm guessing that there's penalties that come along with that. And that's not up to us to say, that, no, you can't do the roof because that's not gonna help you employ people. If it's coming out of their funds or however they pay for that, they have to meet guidelines of this grant, I assume.
Correct.
And I assume the people giving them the money are gonna follow up to see if they do these projects like they said they were gonna do. At least any grant that I've ever dealt with through feds and all that stuff, that's how they do it, but.
Yes. There's going to be an ad hoc committee that has to be created at the town office where when there's going to be some reports done where the business is going to say, this is how we've been using the funds, this is where it's going next time, this is our employee tracks. And the town follows through with it, sends it off to the states, gets the money back from the state to give back to the business for those drawdown requests. And when all the money has been spent by that point, then someone from the state will be here to inspect the site and also just interview the town staff as well. And if they see an issue, well, that's where the contract comes into the town office to say, we're not responsible for paying back the state grant. We're going to be responsible for paying back the state grant, which is something I've been working on since they told me to do so back in March with the letter of intent.
So I guess my question would be, it sounds like there's a fair amount of town staff involvement. Are their funds being captured somewhere rather than to the taxpayer
So,
through this grant?
so that's why I'm mostly here. I'm actually doing a lot more of the work than what the town staff will do. Other than the public hearing that just had to be put in the newspaper notice, I'm putting together the reports and doing, it's usually at most a 30-minute meeting with, it could be the town manager, it could be Isabel, it could be a select board member, it's whoever is interested in being on this group. I put together a report and just show them what's being done. And it's very minimal work, what's happening with the town staff. It's probably no more than 1 hour after we've done phase 2 documents, which is what we're doing now.
Well, there's a question for you.
Mhm.
We're gonna make a motion. Who is that motion? Like, is that moving to do this for the selectmen? For
No.
capacity? Or who? I mean,
None. So basically what you're doing with your motion, I don't like to use this term lightly, but I'm going to, you're basically rubber stamping their project, that it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. It does not tie town staff or the select board to anything. It simply says we've reviewed this project. We are unaware of any policies or goals within the comprehensive plan that would preclude this project from happening. If anything, it actually meets the goals of economic development, maintaining our village main street, and preserving, you know, sort of the broad overarching goals of the comprehensive plan. So you're not tying anyone's hands.
They know.
oh, it's me. It's, the world is different, I know. But you mentioned rubber stamp and I was sniffing some rubber cement, so I didn't know what I was,
Yeah.
detecting.
I wouldn't really call it rubber stamping. I mean, we're depending on you to provide us that feedback that it falls within our scope of our comprehensive plan and policies.
Yep.
So,
I've sort of done the legwork in this instance.
No, I appreciate all that. It's just,
Absolutely.
it's different.
All right. Has anybody got any more questions? More questions?
No, I think they've been answered.
Somebody want to make a motion on this? I didn't take notes, by the way.
you didn't?
I didn't,
How come?
like, there's too many of them.
Oh. I will make a motion that we move forward with the recommendation from the town planner. And that we use her verbiage in the memo to capture my motion. And underline, bold, highlight, any construction needs to follow through with the historical committee for further review.
All right. Do I have a second on that? Well done, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
All those in favor?
Give him
All those opposed?
I'm sure Jenny could have done interesting.
What?
I'm sure you could have done as well. Neil.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for input.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for explaining.
Mhm. I forgot to say that Max is from, you probably know, Midcoast Council of Governments, who does a lot of economic development work, so.
Hey, you might want to get his name down. All that. You got his name and all that stuff?
Oh, yeah.
All right. I knew I couldn't get ahead of you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Unless I'm running a race, you have a good shot at that.
All right. Do you have any Anything else tonight?
I have nothing else tonight.
Well, You're getting out of this cheap tonight, aren't you? We all are. All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Before we do that, can I ask
Yeah,
a couple of questions?
you sure can. Well,
It's related to the nursing home
Sure.
and they have a 74,000 square foot building.
Yep.
And back at some point, there's an ordinance that says it can only be 45. And I'm curious as to the interpretation of that ordinance back along and this proposal.
Yeah, so we do have an ordinance that puts a cap on specifically retail buildings. So it's not commercial, it's retail structures.
Ooh,
And retail structures in Damascotta cumulatively, so if they have any accessory buildings as well, can only be up to 35,000 square feet. I think that's probably what you're thinking of. So it
Yeah.
only applies to retail buildings.
only retail.
it's not, it's not commercial, it's retail.
So you have to be selling a
yes.
product, not a service.
Right, and we have a variety, in the land use ordinance, there's a table of permitting conditional uses, which I'm sure you're familiar with. But there's sort of different categories: institutional, residential, commercial, and there's a variety of retail uses there, and it would only apply to those.
There you go, Wilder.
No, just curious. I didn't know the
curious.
wording. I mean, it's retail, which I guess,
I actually thought that was listed under commercial, not.
maybe that's what I thought.
Well, you and I were thinking along the same lines.
And there is also large scale development standards that apply to all commercial buildings, but those are for buildings more than 20,000 square feet. And there's no cap in that section of the ordinance related to like retail or anything. So there's the large scale development standards, 20,000 square feet of any kind of building. And then there's the retail cap for 35,000. That could be two of the things you were thinking of.
And I was also wondering if my mind was slipping to the point where I couldn't remember things correctly. So,
We're not quite there yet.
well, I feel much better now that
Do we have any update on where they are at? Are we gonna see that again soon, or have you heard anything? And
Yep, good question. I guess that is a good planner's report thing. So I have received an application from them. We talked about me doing my background completeness review. So me, the code officer, and the fire chief are currently reviewing the application and providing the applicants with comments. I'm not, I guess I won't opine on how things went before I got here, if there was like typically revisions based on staff comments. But how I like to work is I like to get, I typically will have like a 4-page list of suggested revisions. Some of those are advisory comments intended to make the application better. Some of those are actual completeness comments related to our ordinance requirements. I will send that off to the applicants and expect a response from them. When I get that response and I can check that they've addressed all of my comments, that's when I deem it complete for the purposes of planning board review and put it on one of your agendas with the appropriate noticing. I don't know if that's how the ordinance sort of words it for the planner. I'm not sure if you've typically had applications go through rounds of revisions before it got to you. But anyway, that's the phase that we're in right now is the staff is reviewing the application, providing comments. I've actually compiled all of my comments and I'm just waiting for my colleagues to weigh in. And then you'll likely see that, depending on how fast they can get back to me at the November meeting. But again, it's sort of dependent on when they sufficiently respond to all of my comments.
Are we only allowed to review the application collectively? I mean,
Correct.
okay, like I couldn't go in and look at the application.
No, so the planning board will review the application collectively. You will get my staff comments as well as like the packet's going to be big. I'm going to say that the packet's going to be quite large because how I like to show it is like the original application and plan set, my comments and then the revised application so that you can kind of see what has changed since I initially reviewed it. And then you'll also see my list of comments in the record. That's also helpful for members of the public who don't want to read 300 pages of application. They can instead look at my like 4-page document and see what has been revised.
Can I mention a concern?
Yes.
Well, basically, it's the Home Depot phenomena. You know, the city, the shining city on the hill.
Mhm.
And it's going to be a huge, massive light source with a massive parking lot with lights that are going to be on 24 hours a day because they have shift changes. I bet. And potentially, and our ordinance specifically says that parking, you know, lights and parking lots and all this stuff has to be shielded from public roads. And I don't see how they're going to do that. I mean, you have all those houses down there in the valley along School Street.
Mhm.
How that can work.
The ordinance also requires fully cut off fixtures. One of the standard conditions that you all adopted was that those fixtures would be fully cut off and that they would be dark sky compliant. I think there's also ordinance requirements that note that without a waiver approved by the planning board, they can't have the lighting on all night. So that would be up to the planning board as far as that process goes.
Don't want it.
So that will be up to the planning board to weigh in on.
And it's just a massive parking lot.
Well, and I think that's gonna fall back to, they have to come to us and show us a set of plans that meet our
I know.
ordinances. And if they can't do that and want to waiver, they need to, regardless, they have to present to us something that meets our ordinances. And if it meets our ordinances by the cutoff and down shading, then if, as long as it meets the ordinance, we need to find a different reason or policy that it's not covering before we can say, no, we can't do that. But
Correct.
they need to come to us fully prepared to
Right.
pass our ordinance as it's written.
Correct. Right.
And we have to follow
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
it, despite feeling.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Yeah.
This is sort of something we've talked about in terms of the difference between sort of your hat as the quasi judicial board and your hat as the legislative board. If you want to pursue ordinance amendments because you're worried about lighting, that's certainly something I can add to my list and something that we could pursue under your legislative hat. But you do all have to remember that if you're reviewing applications, that's wearing your quasi judicial hat. And that's the hat that only reviews ordinances that have already been adopted by the town. You're kind of limited in that scope. And obviously it's up to you to make sure that you're making, that they've provided sufficient information to demonstrate that they've been met. But yeah,
Can a planning board ask an applicant for something that's not in the ordinances? I mean, they can always say no, I guess, but like, for instance, UV panel, you know, some sort of solar efficiency.
it's not in the ordinances. You are always welcome to ask. They do not have to
Right. they can
abide
always
by
say
it.
No.
And but I will, along that same coin, I'm trying to avoid talking about this project in particular
Yeah.
since they're not here, but and talk about ordinances generally. But or the process generally, but along that same coin, you're always welcome to ask. If it's something that's not in the ordinance, they are able to say no. But the planning board, I want you all to remember that the planning board does have, frankly, a lot of sway with applicants, even though it has not felt like that in the past.
Mhm.
The applicants are coming to the town and are, at least most applicants I work with are fairly willing to work with the town on what they're looking for. So what I'm trying to say is don't be afraid to ask, but also remember that that's not something that can be basis for either approval or denial.
And in terms of public hearings,
Mhm.
at what part in the process can we have a public hearing on this?
Yep. So as soon as I deem my application complete, we'll follow the bylaws that we recently adopted. I will schedule it for a public hearing. They're required to have a public hearing because it is larger than 20,000 square feet and it falls under the large scale development standards. So I'll get that scheduled. We'll advertise it on your agenda. And it'll be on there.
It really needs to be in the paper too.
Yep, that's a requirement of the ordinance. Yeah. So we'll get that on the agenda and then it will be up to you guys about moving forward with sort of keeping the public hearing open, asking questions, or taking evidence from the public and then closing the public hearing.
In the past, on big projects, we've had more than one public hearing till.
What I want to avoid, or what I feel more comfortable with, is having a public hearing, but not having a vote on the final application at the same time. You know, oftentimes we've had a public hearing, it closes, and then we vote, you know.
I think this.
Package is
This
complete.
one's gonna go on for a while, Jenny. This is not gonna
Okay.
be a convenient operation.
All right,
I got a feeling this one's gonna be, this could be lengthy, just to absorb the first dose of information.
I really want to go up to Rockland.
Nothing's
and
gonna
see what-
happen after the first night.
Well, like Isabel said, this is gonna be a big packet of stuff that we have to go through. This isn't gonna happen in November and they're building in December.
No.
I mean, this is gonna go, like John, this is gonna go on for a little bit and you're right, we're gonna have to get our information. And then if there's any changes, like any other project, we got to absorb that, see how that fits in, do our homework and then have another meeting on it.
Yeah, I just don't need pressure.
Correct, and rushed into it, correct.
I will say, as far as process broadly, if your desire is to continue the public hearing to another meeting, that would be the motion, not to close the public hearing, because once you close the public hearing, you are constrained in the timeline provided by the ordinance to make a decision.
Hey, don't close it, just keep it open.
Yeah.
So write that down, Jonathan.
So we can just continue the public meeting, public hearing at another date.
If there's reason to
Yeah.
continue, yep, you're.
But you have to have reason to do that, just, I mean, you can't just say,
There may be more
well,
people.
huh?
There may be more people.
right,
So
That's good
either
reason right
in the
there.
past, we've gotten to my 9 o'clock cutoff. In other communities I worked for, we've gotten to our cutoff. We were not done getting through the 50, 60 people that showed up to public hearing. And so we tabled the application, tabled the public hearing until the next meeting. And then sort of how we dealt with that is that the application that was tabled was the first step on the agenda at the next meeting. Where we're typically only dealing with 1 or 2 applications, that's probably less something to think about. But yeah, what you'll be doing is if there's desire from you all to collect additional information, or if you haven't gotten through all of the members of the public who wish to present evidence, then you would continue the public hearing to a subsequent meeting.
what if you get your information and then you have to review a change on the applicant's behalf that they want to change something? Can you hold a separate public hearing based on the new information? So that they're aware of that, or is it specific to what it is, probably, or?
Yeah, I
You
will.
Just get one chance for a public hearing and you can only extend it.
Right, once the public hearing is closed, the clock starts ticking about requiring you all to make a decision. And I think it's 30 days in the ordinance for site plans and potentially longer for subdivisions. So once the public hearing is closed officially, then you're kind of
Yeah.
on a
You
timeline.
you can't buy more
Correct,
time by
correct.
scheduling another public hearing.
Right.
You get one
It was good,
chance.
though. You could put the public hearing way back, too. You could go through a couple of meetings before you even had a public hearing.
Right, I don't think the public
No,
hearing
we
should be
can't
at the
do
first
that.
meeting when we get this packet.
No,
We gotta,
I don't even want to do that. No,
Right.
thank you.
right,
Okay.
I mean, I gotta
mean-
get myself educated into
Correct.
this. I mean, there's gonna be a lot of reading, there's gonna be, did you guys all have your large scale development information? I think probably ought to all brush up on that a little bit before we go into this.
Yeah.
At least go through it. I know you like homework, Wilder.
No, it's watch strength, yeah, homework. Oh, God.
But, this is it's gonna be a bunch of work, and this is technically not talking about.
no, this is any
project, it's
project,
about operational procedure, honestly.
Correct.
So like I said, I don't even want to see a public hearing, especially at the first meeting. And possibly not at the second,
Mhm.
depending on how this goes. Because there's a lot to consider here and it's probably going to be. It might not be the largest building in town, but it's going to be one of the largest buildings in town.
What would be the value to you? This is just a question generally. What would be the value to you of like having a meeting with the applicants and then not scheduling a public, like what would be the value to you in having like 2 or multiple meetings prior to?
More time to review this
Okay,
and learn as much as we can.
And for
about
the
it before
public
we
to
go too
understand
far.
what the project's about.
And I want to make sure that the public, is aware that it's going on. I want to make sure nobody gets blindsided by this just because of the enormity of it.
right.
And it's gonna have major impact on traffic,
Yeah.
on, the
School Street's already bad.
School Street, yeah, is problematic, and it's a real high point in town. It's gonna be like a big beacon up there on the hill.
Okay.
So
We can't.
that, yeah, away from that,
can't
but you're gonna have a lot more time where you've reviewed the project and give us your notes, but we haven't seen that packet. And I think it's unfair to the board to make that decision of getting the packet 2 or 3 weeks in advance, trying to review that and then be ready to make that decision on that night with the public hearing. So I agree with Jonathan. We gotta at least have one meeting where we can sit here, talk about stuff with any applicant, doesn't have to be this one, but any applicant, field some questions that we may have, clarification, different than what you may have come up with, and just to make our determination, and then maybe have it to the.
Unless it's something that's ridiculously simple.
Right, no, I get that, but I mean, I think it's a case by case for something this large or any project this size. And I'll go back to one that we've already done up here on Main Street. That didn't happen in one night.
Okay.
That was many public hearings, if I recall,
Well, I bet we had.
And- and many meetings with the applicant to do different things. But I mean, and granted, that brought in some other changes that we're currently working with now that may skate some of this and make it go a little smoother. But I think in fairness to everybody in Damascotta, that we need to have, at least be able to digest that and then have that time, and then we can have the public meetings.
I'm not too interested in meeting somebody else's timeline. I'm really not.
Right.
I'm sorry to say that, but I don't get, they want to start in February.
Right, we have one chance to do what's right for the townsfolk and make sure that everything's in order, and any applicant has all the time they want to prepare for it. And, it's just, I don't think it's good for us to hurry that along on any applicant.
I'm trying to take it and see where the chips lie.
Yeah.
I don't want to get pushed into anything too quick.
Right.
That's my
Okay.
whole point in that.
All I can say is your track record is impeccable.
Jenny, what place were you referring to when you said we should visit something in Rockland?
Oh, this is they're doing an exact, pretty much the same building is almost built next to the golf course on the Old County Road
Oh,
in
okay.
Rockland. And interestingly enough, I've been going back and forth down that Old County Road, and I haven't really seen it. I don't know why I haven't seen it. But I need to, I'll be going down there tomorrow. I need to, check it out. And they invited us.
Pictures.
I'll take pictures, and they invited us to stop by and tell them, hey, I'm with the Damascotta Planning Board, and that if
didn't
someone would show us around,
Well, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we got to be careful about how we tread those waters, because we can't go there, take pictures
Oh.
soloing. I mean, I remember
No,
taking a
we're not
class
having
about
to
all
do
of this stuff, so.
Right.
So we got to be careful how we do that. So I would suggest if anybody wants to do that, run it by Isabel before we get ourselves in a mess of all of that. So we just have to be super careful of that.
It's very polite to offer, but yeah, there are some requirements.
Correct.
All right.
would it have to be like an official site visit?
Correct.
Okay,
Don't take any pictures.
no pictures.
No pictures. Oh, well. It's all right. Well, anyways, anybody else not gonna talk about that project?
I'm good.
Thank you.
So I want to,
I will add as an aside, I am always happy to answer questions about like specifically process questions, but any questions really about sort of my workflow, I guess, and like what I'm anticipating. Obviously, this is sort of our first large project together.
Like I said, it's a big one. I mean, you're more used to large projects. You just see it in Portland. You gotta turn around and look around at this little one-horse town here that isn't as anywhere near as little as it was when I was a kid. But this is a major undertaking. It needs to be looked at pretty carefully, or we'll all be swinging off a tree somewhere.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure questions are gonna arise.
Yep.
You're gonna get asked questions, and I appreciate your openness with that.
Yep.
You know,
And I did want to remind you all, while we're on the subject of process generally, that if you do receive questions from members of the public, you do need to be careful about, ex parte communications surrounding
Yep,
projects.
you're right.
You're not able to hear opinions from the public
No.
and allow that to sway you. If
No.
they have specific questions or even want to provide an opinion to me, I'm certainly happy to pass it along to the applicants that this is something that the public
I
is
get
worried
that.
about.
I get that.
Okay, so the public, if they have questions or concerns, they have to either contact you or Matt, or I mean, not Matt, Andy, town planner, or
They should contact me.
And or attend a public hearing if we have, for whatever
Okay.
we have, and that's their best time
Right.
to voice
That
their
is their
concerns.
best time. And that's what I always tell people is you can tell me all you want, but you should really attend the public hearing. I am not the decision maker. I am simply providing a recommendation to the planning board.
okay.
Great. You good?
Motion to adjourn.
I'll
Second.
second it.
All those in favor? Thank you.
We did it.
All right. Thanks, everybody.